everyone, and welcome to China EVs and More, where my co-host Lei Xing and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the China EV, AV, and mobility sectors. What Lei and I discuss today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. If you enjoy this room, please help us get the word out to other enthusiasts, and of course, tune in again next week. My name is Tu Li. I am the Managing Director at Sino Auto Insights, a global management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. Hello, Lei. 9月怎么样?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. This is your co-host Lei Xing, former chief editor of China Auto Review, and this is episode lucky number 111. I was at the New York Auto Show yesterday, so why don't we begin by talking about one of the biggest chatter that came out at the New York Auto Show, and in relation to your newsletter, which had a long lead on America's infatuation with big trucks and SUVs.
Thank you for being one of the two people that read it.
When I receive it, I read it, man.
I had two long rants. One was the GM
that we will talk as well.
Divorce from Apple and Android. Let's talk about that. But why don't you start with this big infatuation? So,
two housekeeping. One, we just pushed out our latest Max episode with Luminar CFO Tom Fenimore. Make sure to listen to that because they will be at the Shanghai Auto Show in 10 days, 11 days.
Everybody's going to be at the Shanghai Auto Show.
And two is related to the Shanghai Auto Show. This is our last episode with us both being in the US continent because next week we will be on the other side of the world.
Oh my God.
I'm actually a little bit, I don't know, what's the word to describe? Nervous, anxious, everything.
Do you remember being on a plane for more than 8 hours?
Because the last couple of days I've been nothing but taking care of logistics issues, basically. I just made a reservation or appointment for the PCR testing on Sunday afternoon. But most likely we'll be doing our next episode next Friday, live episode at least, next Friday, China time in the morning. So very exciting coming up.
And for those that can remember, the last auto show was in Shanghai 2 years ago. And this was when that woman had danced on the Tesla Model 3 roof.
Yes.
And last year's was supposed to be in Beijing, but it was canceled because of COVID. And so this is the first year that foreigners will be able to travel into China, but only if you had a visa beforehand, probably.
Right.
Journalists are still having problems getting visas to enter because let me explain for those that aren't familiar with that process. For China, there are tourist visas, there are business visas, and then there are journalist visas. Journalist visas, depending on what country you're from and depending on what media outlet, it might be a bit more difficult. And so for the last several years, I would say, Lei, and you tell me if I'm wrong, it's been pretty challenging, generally speaking, for number one, for American journalists to get visas. So there are a number of journalists from well-known media outlets like Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, that live in Hong Kong, that live in Taipei, that live in Seoul, covering the China automotive sector, covering the China mobility sector, covering the AI and chip sector, because they've not been able to get journalist visas. And so if they went into China on a visa that is not a journalist visa and they're doing journalism, they would be in big trouble. Hence, it's very important for them to have the official approval to get into China. And so I think what's going to happen is you and I, Lei, are probably going to get pinged a lot to to be eyes and ears for a lot of those people. And we're friends with a lot of them. We know a lot of them. They're very diligent, very hardworking, very curious. But anyone that has lived, covered China from a business standpoint, politics standpoint, from a media standpoint, know that it is so dynamic and it's just really, really tough to keep up with. So kudos to all those journalists. We will help you if we can, and you have a couple 3 cities that you'll be visiting, and I'll be doing the same. So
yeah, I mean, even for me, who's been in China that many number of years, I need to go there to see with my own eyes what has changed. And that's what I'm looking forward to the most.
And what I believe, Lei, is that you're going to go to Beijing and you're going to be like, I didn't remember this here. I didn't remember this here. This restaurant has closed. This street has completely changed.
Yeah, Liangmajiao is one example where I used to live.
Yeah.
I mean, at work.
If I'm being 100% frank and honest, I'm a bit anxious to go to Shanghai because, as most of you know who've listened on this podcast, it's one of my favorite cities in the world. And I was heartbroken, along with a lot of other Shanghairen, when it was on lockdown. But I've been told that although there's some PTSD with the residents of Shanghai, everything has kind of moved towards normal. If you can call a price war and an economic slowdown in China normal. But for those that are going to the auto show, let us know, DM me or DM Lei. We'd love to meet you in person, talk with you, take you out for a beer. We're actually thinking about spending a bit of money to have a happy hour or host a happy hour. And I think that's a terrific way for you and I to reconnect with a lot of people that we haven't spoken with or seen in 6, 8, 10 months, a year, 18 months. So
yeah, very much looking forward to it. And I guess the lesson is really China sometimes can change in an instant. The lockdown being the perfect example, right? But it's already been a year since the lockdown, so time flies. Anyways, we got to get back to our topic on the RAM 229 kilowatt hour battery and the 500.
The 3,000 pound, 1.5 ton battery.
Yeah, everything is big in America, and the RAM 1500 Rev is the latest example of that.
And so these are Halo vehicles, but the bread and butter is going to be sub $45,000, sub $50,000 EVs. That's where that tipping point is going to be reached when every single one of the major automakers in the United States has a viable product, sub $50,000, 5-seat, 6-seat, crossover SUV. Most likely sedans will work, but not so much.
America needs a small EV revolution, because you pointed it out in the newsletter about your trip to Washington, D.C. And I think you mentioned about parking space and how much parking is there in America, right? I think there was a recent article about that being, whether it's good or bad, right? So, I mean, to a point in the newsletter, I think we sometimes, can America embrace the small EVs? Right now, the answer is probably no.
I do much more preaching in my newsletter than I do on this podcast, but
yeah,
I believe there's an opportunity, and so I won't preach about it. But if we think about usage, parking lots and parking structures in the United States in busy cities normally are used about a third of the day. Let's say 8 to 5, 9 to 6, 9 to 7. And then they sit there doing nothing. So if we are able to adopt either smaller cars, more efficient cars, or shared services and restrict some private passenger vehicles into the United States. And you're talking to somebody who lives just outside of Detroit right now. So it's still pretty anathema to the folks in the Motor City. But as Ford and GM have their own city solutions teams, and they're starting to look at more about mobility services, you will also start to see their product portfolio evolve over time as well, I think, because they might not be able to make those $90,000 Ram 250 kilowatt hour trucks because What if they are restricted from buying rare earth metals from you know who? So a lot of things at play that just seem to just dial up the intrigue factor for everything that's going on in the EV and AV and chip and mobility sector globally too. So because Europe's playing a role, Macron and I forget her name. They're both in China right now. And, they're talking about rare earth metals. They're talking about imports from China for EVs. They're talking about all that stuff.
Yeah.
So anyways, there looks like there's a few new listeners. If you don't think China is involved in every single aspect of the mobility sector, you'd be wrong.
Yeah.
And this is where you'll start to see the rubber meet the road when and if GM and Ford, because GM specifically, they have a $40,000 Blazer EV and a $30,000 Equinox EV that are supposed to be launching later this year. One of them is supposed to be launching later this year, one in 2024. They're not going to be profitable without Chinese refining of the rare earth metals and purchasing from Chinese owned mines. Now, I'm not saying Chinese mines because China owns mines in Brazil. They own mines in South America and Chile. So that's why I said Chinese owned mines. Okay. Our good friend Steve Levine today had an interview with Lithium America's CEO. I forget his name.
John Evans.
But if you really want to peel those layers of the onion back, you got to know about battery chemistries, battery cells, and where those raw materials come from.
Yeah. And we've only recently seen Ford and GM announce, which vehicles actually get how much of the updated tax credits, right? Some full, some not, because of the IRA, the new language that goes into effect on April 18th.
And we also know that Senator Manchin is not very happy with Ford, and then he's not very happy with Tesla because the essence and the spirit of that IRA is not what the deals they have with CATL are meant to be.
I mean, if the aim of the IRA is get this so-called entity of concern, which equals China basically out of the equation.
and Russia.
It's impossible. Not, at least not in the near-term foreseeable future.
Right.
So
I'd say by at least through 2030.
Yeah, right. And I think Simon Morris, he tweeted that, the Gigafactory takes 2 years. Mining takes 10 years, right? These are long lead times for you to materialize on what you're trying to achieve. So, yeah. Anyways, so this RAM won't come until end of next year. But, I mean, that's the production. It's huge. Every time I look at, F-150 is huge. Lightning is huge. And I look at the Silverado. Man, that's big. And I look at the Ram 1500. It's the biggest of the big.
These things are tanks. They're actually much more dangerous on the roads than ICE counterparts.
And the Ram 1500 has a huge frunk. I think it was like 15 cubic feet. I don't know if that's the right metric, but it's huge.
My son could basically swim in it.
Yeah, like I can fit in there. I'm
like
6'2".
a hot tub, right?
And then they also have side frunks. Can you believe it? Side runks.
I love the ingenuity and use of the space. I do, I believe that's great. I think being able to efficiently use that space is great. But remember, and I'd written this in the newsletter, I've been told by many people, the United States is it's a hauling country. People that tow things and haul things, especially in Michigan, when they go up north, they haul their boats, they haul their camper.
Yep.
Any significant
that's culturally
extra weight. Yeah.
Cultural fabric.
Any significant additional weight on that RAM, we're looking at range cut in half effectively.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, right? In my newsletter, I talked about that. Could they sell a lot of those RAMs at that 250 plus kilowatt hour battery pack? Yes. But we also have to remember that anything over $80,000 for trucks or SUVs will not receive those subsidies. So you're paying full freight on that vehicle. And then if you use it for work to haul things, to tow things, and even if it's a third less range, and we're talking 500 miles, maybe. Well, I forget what Ram said the range was,
500 miles.
but let's say you lose a third of that.
Yeah.
The battery is so massive.
That's why you need that, the kind of overcapacity to account for that, right?
Yes. And God bless American ingenuity, because there are companies like Our Next Energy that are trying to come up with alternatives in order to reduce the size, but while still either maintaining range or increasing range. The longer those types of technologies take to commercialize, the longer we're going to be reliant on China mining ink, China rare earth metal ink. So
yeah. So the New York Auto Show a little bit. I tweeted yesterday that this has become, since I went last year and this year, this has become the Stellantis Hyundai Kia Auto Show, because they're the ones that are really launching any new products or winning awards, right? Ioniq 5 last year, Ioniq 6 sweeps. And the interest China factor was the Aura Funky Cat was one of the 3 finalists for the World Urban Car. And Wang Chuanfu, right, was one of the finalists for the Person of the Year, which was won by the Sanyup Li, the designer for Hyundai and Genesis. So I think right now Hyundai Kia in America is almost like BYD in China.
I'm just going to tell you that, Lei. That's a bias, because Wang Chuanfu is should be not only automotive executive of the year, he should be business person of the year for the entire world.
So they're at their pinnacle, which I think is, how can you sustain that? It's going to be hard. But again, right? I mean, the Hyundai Kia they've been killing it, right? With their products and designs. Genesis, right? The Genesis, the GV80 coupe concept they showed. And I got to talk, another China factor, I got to talk to the Jeep CEO, Christian Menier. And this is exclusive. I asked him, do you plan to launch some of the, let's say, the Wagoneer EV and the Recon EV in China? He said they're considering that. They're also considering the next steps in terms of, being an import brand, but everything is under discussion.
So can you give our audience a quick summary for those that don't know the details of what happened with Jeep over the last 12 or 14 months?
Jeep is the OG in China because Beijing Jeep is the first. Even before SAIC Volkswagen, Beijing Jeep is the first foreign car joint venture. And then it became Chrysler, Daimler Chrysler, and now it's Mercedes-Benz, right? It's called BBAC, purely Mercedes. And Jeep backed out of the Chinese market, no longer producing.
And the only clean energy vehicle they have on sale is the Jeep Wrangler 4xe.
In the US, they also have some of the other models that are being launched.
They have the Grand Cherokee 4xe.
Right. So, and then I asked him, do you plan to go to the Shanghai Auto Show? And he said, I can't. So,
did Tavares not let him, or?
I don't know. Maybe it's a visa issue. I think he hinted it was a visa issue, but
okay.
I didn't catch Carlos, but I would have asked him the same question, but I don't know.
I wonder how much GAC had to do with that visa issue.
Yeah. We haven't heard, right? Like Maribara and Jim Farley, are they going? We haven't heard any.
I don't think they're going. Although Buick is launching an EV SUV.
I don't know.
And I should double down on that. Mary had a China day last year, right? Middle of the year late last year, where she announced by 2025, GM would have 10 EVs built off the Ultium platform in the China market. So for those that are wondering, GM is completely all in on China.
Yeah, but the Cadillac, locally produced Cadillac Lyric has been dead silent. I have not heard a single word talked about.
I got invited to one of those Cadillac houses in Shanghai. So I'm just going to go visit one of those. It's like a Neo house, but for Cadillac.
That's their first globally, I think. It's a huge, yeah.
And for those that are interested in GM, they also launched an import service called Durant Guild And what they're trying to do is build excitement for GM products that aren't normally sold in China. So they'll help you import a Corvette. They'll help you import a Tahoe. They'll help you import, I think, a Silverado or an Escalade. But be careful because Silverados can't drive on quite a few of the Shanghai city streets.
And the interesting thing and the weird thing is Ford announced their plans for Shanghai Auto Show. They're announcing the new Edge L SUV, the big SUV. They're introducing a pickup truck, could be localized. There's another model. There's no EVs. There's no nothing. So
is the Ford the Maverick?
I don't know. It's a smaller
or a version of it, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
But no new EVs, anything. So I mean, it's the biggest stage in the biggest EV market in the world, and that shows, right?
Well, so to your point about the Lyric, which has been fairly silent, so has news about the Mustang Mach-E in China. And we should remind the audience that they're actually both built locally in China. They're not imported. So there is no price disadvantage on the purchase of those vehicles. As a matter of fact, Ford put $10,000. They discounted the Mach-E by almost 60,000 RMB, or close to $8,000 or $9,000.
Yeah, those are the older inventory. So
yeah, so you can, I think, accurately state that generally foreign automakers, regardless of whatever the powertrain is, could be EV, could be ICE, they are having a tough time selling in China right now.
Yeah. Anyways, if you look at these regionally different automakers, Kia already announced their China NEV strategy a few weeks ago, right? So they're there. And then the Germans, obviously, it's going to be a huge event for them, whether it's Volkswagen or the premium brands. Ford, I don't know. GM just announced the Buick. Nothing else so far. So, and then maybe Honda. Honda has 2 new EVs revealing. I mean, that's about it.
And then there's just going to be a plethora of Chinese companies.
Right.
Yeah, that. And so all that sizzle is going to be, there's going to be a void and a vacuum, and it's all going to go to the Chinese EV companies.
And this thing is already starting tomorrow, Friday, Chinatown. Chery is doing a NEV night. They're launching a new brand called iCar. Hello, Apple. They're launching a new high-end series for the Exceed brand. They're launching their new hybrid platform. So this kind of the atmosphere is starting to buzz.
Starting.
Yeah.
That's why. So I bought a 30-hour ticket. It's going to take me 30 hours to get to China. And that's why I'm going to arrive on the 12th, Lei, so I can spend 1 or 2 days not working so hard and just kind of
get familiar with the new environment.
And then starting on the weekend, I'll probably hit it hard, catch up with friends, catch up with some of the new vehicles, just walk around Shanghai, be curious, take a bunch of pictures. So I would invite everyone that's listening to the podcast or on this live show to follow Lei and I, because we'll probably tweet quite a bit, and we'll definitely have a lot of updates.
Yeah,
likely like every day. And
an hour.
You know that Lei and I are very good about the rumor mill too, because I think you and I are pretty much two of the only guys that really hear the real deal of what's going on the ground in China with regards to brands, products, executives. And so that's part of what we love. And so we'll try to bring you accurate information up by the minute.
Yeah. So going to the next topic, March sales, I did a few calculations, picking out several case studies. So for NIO, they would have to do over 70,000 a quarter in the next 3 quarters to meet their target of
250?
Yeah, 250. So that's one example. Second, Li Auto would have to do close to 100,000 a quarter to meet their target. I think it was either 300,000 or 350,000. But anyways, it's a huge number. And BYD 1 million a quarter in the next 3 quarters. And Zeekr, over 40,000 a quarter if they want to double to 140,000 units.
And for those wondering, Zeekr has 2 vehicles. One is what would you call it, a Grand Tour?
Well, 3 soon.
Yeah, 3 soon. One is a Grand Tour, so not meant to be a high runner. And one is an MPV, another not really meant to be a high runner. So
the 001 and the 009. And then the third model is the X.
Which Hi-Fi also makes an X.
Yeah,
and Tesla also makes an X.
So by the way, Li Auto just announced they will announce their BEV solution. I don't think they're gonna reveal their next BEV car, but maybe a precursor of what's to come at the Shanghai Auto Show. Much awaited. And then just I think in general, I think March was on up. I think CPCA said was 550,000. Still below the peaks that we had at the end of last year,
But I read that despite the price war, sales were actually a bit disappointing. So that indicates to me that it's even likelier that there's going to be some sort of stimulus from the Chinese government to goose sales even a bit more. So
I think it's a matter of time and timing of when it is announced and in what format.
And you and I should start a countdown. When is Tesla going to cut price again?
Let's just say something probably around the auto show time. Why not? Right?
Yeah. So March was 88,000.
Yeah, 88, 89,000.
Yeah. They haven't broken out how many were exported, but production wise, solid month. Because remember that they probably have a 1.2 million unit annual run rate. So that would be about 100,000 units. They're running at 100% capacity per month.
Yeah.
And we also know that Q1 of every year for the China market is notoriously slow.
Yeah. So I mean, I look at that leaderboard. If you look at all the names on that leaderboard, besides Tesla, besides, let's say, SGM Wuling, which is GM joint venture, you don't find a foreign brand until you get well down to the list, right? So that's how the current sort of the dynamic of just Chinese just owns the market.
And I got to point out, there's a couple tweets. There's a Bloomberg article about how China is squeezing out the foreign competition, and there was tweets about the Chinese government put their thumb on the scale. And I want to be fair here. The Chinese did have some protectionist measures, but the foreign automakers played a major role in their own demise over the last several years. So I'm just trying to call a spade, that because they were too focused on the profitability of their ICE vehicles, they were slow to react to the market. And when they did react to the market, they brought analog devices to a digital party, and they're still paying for it. So we know with the speed of the China market, if you're slow to react and you're slow to respond, you can get behind very, very quickly. Yeah. It's very unforgiving.
In fact, I was speaking to some of the industry folks at the New York Auto Show, and I just told them that, some of these foreign legacies, they still don't realize the severity, the situation they're in. So,
I've talked about this. I think that the executive teams, the management suite, have a pretty good idea. But I think vice president below, director and below, they might still think that they have this available time ample time to make that pivot. And there's no airspace. There is no airspace for mistakes if you are a foreign automaker in China.
Yeah, I think in the case of Jeep, Stellantis, I think quite a few of their counterparts are really going to have to think about and make a decision whether it is even in the better interest to not be in China. This is something that's seriously starting to, it's just different. We're in a different era.
But this is the crazy thing. and hear me out here. If they're not in China, then the Chinese battery companies have less incentive to support them outside of the China market. And we know that for a while, demand for battery cells, especially the LFP, more affordable from a Envision AESC, from a CATL, from a BYD, from a Goshen, they're going to be in higher demand. So if I sell to you in two regions, I'm much more likely to provide you with additional supply. If you're not in the China market, maybe you're lower down on the totem pole because your entire supply volume is lower. Okay. So I understand what you're saying, because you're just going to be a zombie, dead man walking, if you continue to struggle in the China market and don't have significant products in the pipeline and it has to be within the next 24 months. Anything farther out, you're done. I don't think we're going to see the market share from Volkswagen that they had 5 years ago ever again.
No.
Volkswagen's never going to get that back.
No. What I was trying to get across is, maybe the question is, sometimes, let's say in the case of Stellantis again, do you really have to be in China to be a successful company? And what I mean by successful is making profit, and you're selling as well as everywhere else, but you're willing to sacrifice the Chinese market for that. What I was trying to say is, this is something that that these foreign automakers are going to have to consider.
In regards to Stellantis, they have to reconcile the fact that the lion's share of their profit comes from an American company.
Right, and I think what the European Commissioner von der Leyen, what she said, if you listen to her speech or one of the press conferences, is that these European companies are not being treated on playing field, right? I mean, that's what they want. And so Carlos, he's smart, maybe, in a way.
But Carlos also has shareholders, because again, when they were selling and very popular, they didn't have any complaint in the world. They kept their mouth shut. Now that he's left the market, he's complaining left and right.
Yeah.
So it's fine. Yeah, there was some unfairness, but despite that, you guys made tons of profits from the market.
Yeah, speaking of complaining, we move over to the, I know we're past the 40-minute, but just more on the China EV 100 forum. Speaking of complaining, we had Richard Yu of Huawei kind of complaining about what's been happening to their luck.
Talk about shareholder value, right?
Yeah, and then the biggest comment that came out was how he said, Huawei, the Neos and Li Auto's X phones don't want us. They have their own route. The foreign companies, they don't want to use us because we're sanctioned. The Chinese companies, some of them, they don't want to use us because they're afraid to lose their soul. So, and then he was kind of complaining without openly complaining about the decision not to use the Huawei brand on the Ito.
But he was 100% accurate, right? I don't think anything that you've just said that he said. I read some of the stuff that he had said. I don't believe anything he said is actually incorrect. And
that's the thing that I said, it tears you up a little bit.
Yes. What foreign brand a desperate foreign brand? And so maybe in 3 years, in order to gain favor to the Chinese government and the local market in China, maybe one of the lesser foreign brands concedes and says, you know what, we're just going to use Huawei for our hardware software stack.
But the really interesting thing is their high model, the Huawei Inside model, so one with ArcFox and one with the Avatar 11. These are completely different performing on the market. I mean, ArcFox, right? It's basically failed, whereas Avatar seems to be getting it right for some reason.
Yeah.
I mean, Avatar is a younger brand than ArcFox. So what went right and what went wrong?
Yeah, and that was the thing. I saw a ton of ArcFox because it's Beijing, right? So I saw a ton of ArcFox.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
But the only real customer they have is an SOE.
Yeah, they're working with JAC, Cherry, in the Ceres model, which is the Huawei Select model. So we'll see about that.
He and his team need to just be head down, grind it out, and build a superior product.
Well, he probably going to be no longer at Huawei.
Yeah.
The rumors, right? But Xiaomi has
Yes.
denied that he's joining Xiaomi. And then I think the other comment came out of Leap Motors chairman. He was saying that smart EV is going to get down to 50,000 RMB in how many years?
Yeah. 50,000. So that's effectively an $8,000 car.
It just scares these foreign companies more.
Yes. But it is still the Wild West in the EV space in China. And the crazy thing is that the Chinese companies are beating each other up.
Yeah.
Because most of the foreign brands have gotten the standing 8 count. And I'm a little bit harsh, but ABB, Audi, Beamer, Benz, they've kind of had a reprieve because not a lot of premium Chinese EV companies and startups have been launched or established yet. That is changing, with BYD, with Hi-Fi, with our friend Wei Ming's company. So in the next 3 or 4 years...
Are they doing anything in Shanghai? No.
I don't think so.
Haven't heard, yeah.
He'll be there, and I'll try to grab a drink with him. But because I definitely want to catch up and talk Bianca. But yeah, he wouldn't miss it. That's not his style, right?
And then so the other thing that came out of China EV 100 forum, I think will be very important going forward is both Wang Chuanfu and the CEO of Volkswagen brand China, they called for the continuation or the extension of the purchase tax exemption.
Saw that.
It's one of the things that is likely going to happen, I think, if they're willingly to openly, say that. And in fact, I think these, MIT and other organs have kind of hinted at these stimulus or incentives coming out. So we'll see about that. And then the former minister of MIT gave out a prediction that by 2030, there will be 100 million NEVs on the road in China out of a total of 450 million vehicles. So roughly, less than 20%? Yeah, one-fourth.
1 in 5?
Yeah, 1/5.
For those that are wondering, China buys about 20 to 22 million cars a year. That should grow by 2030, probably get closer to 26, 27. But 100 million EVs is a massive, massive number.
And remember, Wang Chuanfu talked about penetration this year could even reach 50% in certain months.
That's because he has in his spreadsheet 4 million earmarked for BYD.
3.6, right? 3.6
Yes.
is the publicly announced target.
Yeah. It's not going to be a production problem or a challenge.
And 3.6, so put it into perspective, 2021, China total NEVs was just over 3.5 million. And BYD is doing that many this year.
Didn't BYD do 800,000 in the quarter? No? Was it 800,000?
The Q1 was, you were talking last year? No. Q1 was 550,000.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I read something. I forget now.
800,000 is their export target.
Yes. Export goal.
Yeah.
And the last thing that I wanted to ask you about was your thoughts on GM getting a divorce with Apple and Android.
Oh, yeah. My thought is that this is a calculated risk that GM is willing to take because they think their system is good enough that they will please their customers. But I don't know. I was talking to some people. They would miss it at the auto show. I think they said it's a bad decision, but you got to do what you got to do.
Did you agree with every single point I made with my rant? I can only call it a rant.
I don't know if I'm in 100% agreement with you.
Okay. No, but that's good. What did you not completely agree with?
No, I mean, it's like I said, I mean, for me, as a owning a car that has Apple CarPlay, I can't live without it. So,
but you have to admit that even using Apple CarPlay it's not optimized. It's still clunky.
Yeah, of course.
So there are opportunities to improve the user experience. And so that's all I meant with that. And until they have a track record of building amazing and engaging user experiences, GM's gonna have a 100% skeptics. And I emphasize that Android or Alphabet or Google and Apple are not resting on their laurels. They're improving and they're looking to take more digital real estate in the interior of that vehicle. They're looking to create a gauge cluster and the infotainment system. So what's left if you're GM or Volkswagen? There's absolutely nothing left because you're sharing that data now. And that interface is made by Apple or made by Google. So that logo, when you turn on that car, you might see the Volkswagen logo, but you're also probably going to see that Apple logo.
Or at least a familiar interface.
Yeah. And so I think all of the automakers have to make this decision.
Yeah.
But I don't think they will.
The thing is, from a perspective of giving your customers a choice, flexibility, then you're not doing that by what GM has announced, right? So that's why I said, it's a calculated risk that they're willing to do this.
The only company I know that has been successful at not giving people a choice, Apple.
Or Tesla?
Yeah, well, Tesla, yeah. Tesla for sure. But and I think back to that statement by Henry Ford. You can have any color you want.
As long as it's black.
Of your Model T, as long as it's black. And so, again, I respect the bold move from GM. Do they have the bench strength to back that up and execute? Because the business decision to me was prudent. And I would rather do it sooner rather than later, because get that backlash out of the way and focus on, first of all, and I had actually written almost a page and a half and I cut it all out because I couldn't stop thinking about all these different scenarios.
Yeah.
And my thought is make it initially super simple, but make it freaking bulletproof.
Yeah.
So people, because if you don't like it because it's not designed well, or it could be designed better, that's one thing. If it's buggy and if it, low latency and it doesn't match what the iPhone does. And the other part of my rant lay was talking about those journalists who are bashing it when they're probably typing on their MacBook Pro, using their iPhone, listening to Apple Music and then Apple News. So they're using, and they've been convinced by Apple, this closed ecosystem creates the best user experience, yet they're turning around and ripping GM. It was just short-sighted to me that most of these bad takes were out there. And yeah, is it almost an impossible task to build something, let's say within the next 48 months, that you want to try to compete with an Apple or a Google from a technology standpoint? Yeah, it's freaking daunting. But if they do, they win. Yeah. And, the other example really quickly that I gave in the newsletter was, and I've oversimplified this, but if you're Mary Barra, if I'm Mary Barra Lay and you've created the latest TikTok app that is starting to go viral, I would call you, and if my operating system and my app store and my infotainment system was awesome, I'd be like, hey, Lay, I know you charge $5 for this app on the Apple store, or it's free and Apple gets 30%. I'm going to give you access to the 10 million cars I sold this year, or the 5 million cars I sold this year. I'm going to flash my software, and your app's going to be on it, Lay. And for the first 6 months, I'm not going to take any of that margin. But if you get a high engagement rate on this app using our platform, then we, let's agree on an X margin where we get a piece of it. And on top of that, because we own the operating system, we designed it and it's native to our system, we can help you design the app so that it feels like it's native to our Ultify hardware software stack. And so again, I'm oversimplifying this, but if they get it right, this is the opportunity they have. And Guess what? Because Apple's not part of the ecosystem, the Apple App Store is not there, you can't get it anywhere else. It'll be on the iPhone, but it can't be on your GM Ultifi platform unless, so shrewd move by Mary. Now they just need to execute.
Yeah.
So anyways.
Very different thinking. So,
but let me ask you this. If I gave you $5 and you had to bet between GM's Ultifi and Volkswagen's Cariad, in 5 years, who do you think is going to come out on top?
Well, if I'm here in the U.S., I would root for the U.S. company.
Because Volkswagen, that's what they're thinking too. You know that, right? So
yeah.
But hey, thanks for joining, everyone. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We will talk with you in China next time.
Yeah, I'll be in Hong Kong. So, but at least in the same side of the world. So, okay. All right. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lee, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.